5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Would you introduce yourself, please?
All right, my name is Jack Zuckerman. I was a teacher here in Brentwood for 34 years. I retired in June of 1990.
And what was the name of the school or the position that you retired from, Jack?
I retired from the Ross building, and I am trying to remember from which department and subject. I think my last year was as an English teacher, but I am not totally positive. It might have been as a history teacher, and it might have been English and history, because I functioned in all capacities.
Jack, what was Brentwood like when you came here?
Well, let's see. That would be back in the 50s. 56 was the first year I came to Brentwood. We had, let's see now, the administration building where I taught. The village school was there. Southwest was there. Southeast had been built, but they hadn't finished it. And I remember the first day, it was an orientation or something like that. And we had planks to walk over the area that was muddy because it had rained very badly, into the school. And some people didn't make the planks, and they came in rather bedraggled. And that was about it. I don't know if I said Southwest. Southwest was there. And everything else that's here now in Brentwood pretty much grew after I came.
What are some of the most memorable, what are the most enduring memories that you have of those initial days?
I mean, when I first started teaching?
Yes.
Well, it wasn't like they told us in teacher school. That was number one. I started teaching with 7th grade because Brentwood at that time didn't have a high school. It didn't have a junior high school. All the youngsters from Brentwood went to Bayshore to continue beyond their elementary education. And in fact, the diplomas used to read graduate of Brentwood High School at Bayshore. And that's how those diplomas read. I was hired as a 7th grade teacher, actually as a 6th grade teacher. And before I taught, I was moved into 7th grade because they were starting a junior high here. The expansion pressures had begun, the expansion to the 50s. And so the need for 7th, 8th, and eventually 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th came about. But at that time, it was 7th grade. We taught at what is now the library, the front of the library, the old administration building. And there were 5 rooms, I believe. And I taught right across the hall from the district superintendent at the time, Gene Hoyt. And it was sort of a funny experience teaching opposite the fellow who was in charge of the school system. But it was fun. It was fun. We didn't have service teachers at the time. So I taught my own music, art, phys ed, from whatever I knew of teaching phys ed, English and history. And there was another teacher who taught science and math. And what we did was rotate these 4 subjects so that he taught the science and math to my youngsters, and I taught the English and social studies to his kids.
And you've already answered this question in part, but over the years, what are probably 1 or 2 of the greatest changes that you've seen take place in the district?
The biggest change, I think, in the district was the change from being a small village into what is essentially an urban situation with a lot of people in a 22 square mile area and a school district. I'm putting this in the context of being a teacher, a school district that was being run as a village when it probably should have been better run as an urban school district. The problems, the pressures were, I think, too great for a village superintendency to handle.
Jack, I know you, and I know how much you've loved teaching. I want to ask you, though, what are one or two of the most painful memories that you associate with your Brentwood tenure?
That's pretty hard to give you an answer to. It's easier to remember the better ones,
yes,
and it's harder to remember the worst one. I think there was a time that I was working as an English teacher, and I had a youngster who ended up at a mental institution in Brunswick. And I had started journals with that group. And when the journal that she was writing for me was her only contact with the outside world. And I was her only contact, really. And one day the journal came to me and I opened it, and she had probably cut a vein, and then with a finger in the blood, she had written across the page, "Help." I have never forgotten that. It seared into my brain, and that is an incident that I just can't lose. Other painful things? Oh, I don't know. Seeing youngsters that I taught, names in the newspaper for one murdered on the streets of Manhattan, one murdered on an overpass over Sunrise Highway. This kind of thing, really. But, you know, the more pleasant instances definitely outweigh the...
Let me ask you about some of the more pleasant instances then. Who are some of the people that you've worked with that you hold dear to in your heart, or that you remember most vividly?
You mean faculty or students?
Well, I'm thinking now in terms of colleagues and teachers, administrators that you may have worked under that made a mark on you.
Oh, I think everyone that I worked with probably left some kind of impression on me. I think my first department chairman, who was Burl Knott, made a great impression on me. I remember the first year I taught, walking into her with my grade book at the end of the year's half and saying to Burl, "What do? I think 20% of my youngsters are going to fail, and I know I've been trying to work with them." And she looked at the grades. She knew what I had been doing. She looked at me and said, "Fail them." And, you know, in other words, the courage of your convictions, follow them. And if you think they don't deserve to pass, then go ahead and act upon your convictions. And I followed that pretty much, you know.
Jack, your convictions also led you to become an innovator in many ways. Can you tell us something about the programs or special programs or projects that you either began or were associated with over the years?
I worked with a state project here in Brentwood for 2 years. I was out of the regular classroom and worked out of Central on a state-funded program that was to fund putting youngsters to work as a part-time experience, academics part of the morning and work experience the rest of the day. That was one of the things that I began. I introduced, I guess, the computer into the classroom for grading purposes, for diagnostic purposes, and I offered to share whatever I knew with my colleagues, but I never had any takers. No one wanted to go near a computer in those days.
You were also on the ground floor as far as consumer education concerned.
Yeah, I was one of the people that went to Albany to help write the original state curriculum for consumer education, and then brought it back here into Brentwood, and we made it a double period with a very strange combination, actually. It was home economics and social studies credit, and the kids got both credits. It was a double period class, and I still meet people on the street who were in those classes, who remember it, and remember it fondly.
Whatever happened to programs like that had succeeded at various times?
My own feeling is, and I'm sure there are people around who would take exception to it, my own feeling was when state or federal funds dried up, the programs were dropped. There was never any great inclination on the part of the district to carry a program once the outside funding stopped.
I'm anxious to know, even though I have an inkling as to what your answer might be, what you've been doing since you retired.
Well, a great deal, I guess. Retirement, as my wife says all the time, doesn't mean that I withdrew from the world. I did a lot of volunteer work. I worked as an ombudsman in nursing homes. I also managed to fulfill some ambitions. For example, going into the state parks during the fall and spring with a camera when I never had a chance to before, to take pictures to see what was there. To go and do things that were not accessible to a person who worked full time. And as a matter of fact, the problem there always is that whenever we had vacations, as you know, as a teacher, everybody else had vacations. So it was always a pressure of time to fit everything into a week. I didn't have that pressure anymore. I could spend time at the beach if I wanted to, or I had time to check out what the fish hatchery was doing, or go to the library, or read a book, or whatever. And then, of course, as you know, I got involved when the retiree units began, and NICET and AFT started those up. I became active in those as well. And that keeps me very, very occupied.
Right. Time is always a problem. It still is a problem.
Oh, yes.
Let me ask you what you miss about at least your working years as a teacher in Brentwood.
Nothing.
Okay. That makes
I have always had the kind of mind, I guess, that said that once I have turned the corner in a career, I don't look back at it. It's finished. And now it's time to do something else. Those energies, those thoughts about what it was like, I don't have time for that. Someday maybe if I'm, I don't know, just sitting around and have nothing else I can do, maybe I'll start thinking back. But right now I don't have time for nostalgia. I've got to keep up with what I'm doing today.
Jack, as a person, want to get to know a little bit more, something more about you. Where were you born, and when were you born?
Born August 9th in 1931. Yeah. Born in the Bronx. I don't remember any of that. Mainly my memories are from living here on the island.
Okay, did you grow up in the Bronx?
No. Well, I mean, I don't know. I really don't. I have a slight difficulty. I don't remember very much of my early years
About
at
early
all.
years. Okay. Do you remember who was president when you began attending school? For those who might be watching this down the road.
Yeah. When I started attending school, FDR, Franklin Roosevelt, was president. I was born during the administration of Herbert Hoover. So that spans quite a number of years.
And when you began teaching, who was in the White House at that time?
In 1956, Dwight Eisenhower was president at that time, yes.
Let's switch gears a little bit here. Since you mentioned having some difficulty with early memories, do you remember any of your elementary school teachers?
No, believe it or not. It's not really an amnesia situation as such. The growing up years at home were difficult, and I think I must have mentally just blocked them out. So that before I got into, I guess, college, I have very sketchy memories of my life.
So that would include your high school teachers as well, then?
Oh, yeah. Okay. Believe it or not. Okay. One or two people only, and that's about it.
Do you maintain any kind of contact with teachers that you had in college, for example? Or do any students of yours maintain contact with you, people that you've had in class over the years?
No, not on a continuing basis, but everywhere I go, I run into them. And, it's sufficient that way. I mean, go to a New Year's Eve party and someone there says, do you remember me in your class 50 years ago? And I say, thanks for the reminding.
Yes. Today, there is a great concern for safe schools. And I was just wondering, over your years in the classroom, what kind of discipline problems do you remember encountering?
Discipline problems in those days probably didn't vary that much from what they are now. I think a lot of people tend to think that everything is worse today than it had been. I think it's because most of the people who are professionals probably came out of an environment that was middle class or upper middle class, and they never saw life as it was. I remember police coming in and taking kids out of school, that kind of thing. So that I know what happened, and the number of fights and that kind of thing. Yes, that went on too. But as far as, well, let's say here in Brentwood, discipline problems by and large were verbal. Kids talking back kind of thing. I once had a class that turned out to be, I wouldn't be surprised if every one of them went on to college, a very bright class. Their discipline problem was basically the kind of thing that they tried to outwit the teacher, and the teacher spent time trying to outthink them. And I enjoyed it because they were basically a challenging group. And I think we both learned from each other. It was very, very little by way of physical violence on a day-by-day basis. Kids, I think, were more oriented toward getting through school and going on to a career. And here in Brentwood, it was very, very important. There was a need, I think, here for people to improve their economic lot by using education. In the early days when I was teaching, that was very, very strong. There was the way out to a better, more full life than they saw here in Brentwood. Brentwood had nothing to offer them. That was the problem. Yeah. There were no movies. There were no stores. If you wanted a supermarket, you had to go to Bayshore. Yeah. Everyone grew up knowing they were going to leave. And what were they going to do? Well, they wanted to do something better than they saw here.
Then does that explain in part why you became a teacher? Why did you choose education? Was there someone who influenced you in that direction, or something inside you?
Negatively, I think. I almost remember the day that I made the decision. It was in a high school Spanish class. And a teacher was in front of the room, And I suddenly said to myself, I think I can do better than what I'm seeing. And by golly, I decided I was going to prove it one way or the other.
What subjects did you most enjoy when you were in high school?
Probably the language arts. I enjoyed the history and the English. I have an interest in science and I have an interest in math, but they're much more, I am not as fluent in those as I would like to be.
Would they qualify perhaps as a least favorite subject, or was there a least favorite among all your?
No, not really.
Okay.
I find that even today I'll sit down and read science textbooks because I want to keep up with what's going on. And if I don't understand something, I'll take the trouble to try to find out what it's all about. Maybe that's a sign of as you get older, you suddenly become aware of the fact there is no such thing as a most favorite or a least favorite. It's all important.
Yes.
And it's a question of how you use it if you can.
Were there any teachers in your family?
No.
What kind of work did your family do? What kinds of careers or backgrounds?
My father was in dry cleaning. He was a foreman in a huge chain that covered the metropolitan area called Kent Cleaners. They're no longer in business. And they had a central place that they brought the laundry, and he was in charge of the manual aspects of it. My mother worked, but I don't remember that really.
Mm-hmm. Was yours a large family, Jack? Or
No, just a sister.
Okay.
And then the family broke up, so it was just a mother, a sister, and myself.
Are you the older?
Yes, I am.
Of the two.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh. How do you think being the oldest in the family has impacted on your life? Has that given you a particular burden of responsibility, or?
Not really. I think that the breakup of the family actually led to strain among the people in the family. I hadn't any real contact with my sister for years. Within the last, let's say, 7 or 8 years, we suddenly started talking and discovered that I discovered she's a delightful person, and she seems to indicate the same to her. So now we're on very good terms, but there was a huge hunk of time where we had no contact at all.
I'd like to go back to the experience here at Brentwood. Do you remember who interviewed you for your job here?
Yes, I do. I was originally interviewed by Jim Mitchell, who was an elementary school principal. And that was in the basement of the village school. I went down there. That's where his office was. They were a little tight on space. They were using, by the way, in those days, the firehouse and the churches and storefronts for classes. They were very, very tight. That's why he ended up in the basement. And Jim interviewed me and thought, well, okay, I'll take a chance on him. Hired me. But I never really got a chance to work for him because the starting up of the secondary here had pressures, and that one of them was staffing. So that they took me out of the Jim Mitchell's hands, and I ended up as a junior high teacher, and I've been secondary ever since.
Do you remember what the interview felt like? There are a lot of teachers who coming into the profession are going through the interview process. I wonder if you can recount what it felt like to be interviewed.
Well, with Jim, it was a straight business type of thing. There was nothing specific or about it. I think my next interview probably, though, was a little different, and that was on the secondary level. I was seen by the principal of the to-be secondary school, Fred Weaver, and I walked in to his office, and he had one of these chairs that swiveled back, and he had a hunting knife in his hand, and he was cleaning his fingernails as he was talking to me. asking me such pertinent questions as, if you were teaching in front of the classroom and one of the youngsters sitting in front of you took a straight pen and jabbed it into the rear end of the kid in front of him, what would you do? And they never taught me in teacher school what to do in a situation like that. And I realized the answer to that question could impact on whether I had a job. Because if I said, well, I'll take the kid and throw him through this window, I could lose my job right there and then. And on the other hand, if I didn't say that, I could lose the job also. So I hemmed and hawed and gave an answer that was really not an answer. And Fred stopped me in mid-sentence and said to me, no, what you would do is take that kid out, put him up against the wall, and then right away I knew what I was dealing with. That was fine. I could never function that way, but I knew the philosophy of the administration.
Do you remember what class size was like in the early days of your teaching?
Yeah, it was pretty much in the low 30s, 30, 31, 32. Mm-hmm. We had a school board when I first started. I'm not casting aspersions on the current board because I really don't know them all now. Mm-hmm. But at that time, they were so pro-education that I think it was inconceivable to them that they would do something that would... all you had to do is say it was for the kids, and they automatically said yes to almost anything. Mm-hmm. So that the class size, even though we had no contracts or rules or regulations, was pretty much kept under control. They didn't want to see their youngsters hurt here.
I know curriculum has exploded in the public schools today from what it was then. How would you describe what the curriculum consisted of at that point, though, as compared to today, what it might be?
Well, they're pretty much the same. They haven't changed. They're still the same basic subjects. I think the difference, though, is maybe in some of the methodology. In the case in point is in English, at the time that I started teaching, they were very big on things like diagramming sentences. And before I retired, they were very big on thou shalt not diagram sentences. In fact, you shall not teach grammar. You only to correct youngsters as they make mistakes and don't teach it as a subject. And it always seemed to me to be like building a house on the second floor. If they didn't know their grammar, how could they possibly know how to avoid the errors? But so be it.
Are there any particular rules or regulations that stand out in your memory over the years? Rules that may now appear incongruous, or perhaps rules that provided a structure that you see lacking?
Well, you actually went in two directions there. I'll tell you the truth. The rules that we had to work with at the time, some of them were so absurd that it's just as well they've fallen by the board. No one remembers them. They at one time, the dress of students and teachers was, I think, even in some cases, more important than what they were learning. They actually asked us to stand at the doors with yardsticks and measure the length of the skirts of girls walking into the classroom. Something I could not do, and I did not do, but it was taken very seriously. It shall not be more than so many inches above the middle of the kneecap. And I really wasn't about to check kneecaps on female students. And just, totally crazy. In those days, they expected teachers to come to school, women with dresses, suits, but slacks, jeans, shirts, like T-shirts, were totally, you could be met at the door and fired on the spot for that kind of thing. And men were expected to wear jackets, shirts, and ties. I guess I was the second one. There was one teacher ahead of me, but I was the second one here who just simply stopped wearing a tie. I came with a turtleneck one day. And I was looked at, the raising of the eyebrow, the arching of the eyebrow, the scowl told me I was not in favor that day, but nothing was said because at that point there was a lot of movement on the part of freeing the restrictions that had nothing to do with the day-by-day teaching.
Yeah.
So things went out. In the beginning, you were expected to spend an inordinate amount of time doing things above and beyond the class schedule. If they said they needed you 5 nights a week to do something, it was supposed to be part of your job.
That's what I was going to ask you about work hours, if they had changed at all, or time spent if you've...
Well, it wasn't until 1968 that we had a contract here that said that there was some dignity to be found in a teacher's job. Before that, it was arbitrary and up to the administrator to set the rules. And if he decided that you were to be here for X number of nights, for exhibitions, open school night, or whatever the case may be, they had the authority to do it. I mean, if you wanted the job, you were here, and there was no question about it. Fortunately, those days are no longer around, although there are those who would like to bring them back again.
Open school night that you referred to has been part of the tradition. Did you see changes in that custom over the years, or in the practice or operation of it?
I think, and I have no way to measure this, I think I saw fewer parents as the years went by than I did in the beginning. There used to be long lines outside a classroom because the parents, again, coming from a middle class environment, by and large, they were very concerned and had the time to express that concern. I'm very hesitant to say that the parents afterward didn't have a concern. I'm sure they did, but they might not have had the time or the ability to take the time to come to school and see the teacher, and only took the time when they had to, when there was a problem, to come in, your kid's failing, or your kid did this, or your kid did that.
Jack, as far as your preparation as a teacher is concerned, on both sides of the issue, how did you feel that you were adequately prepared, and for which parts of your day did you feel that you were not prepared when you got into a classroom?
It's pretty hard to answer that. I went to a very good college, Queens College. Queens, at the time I went there, was among the top 10 in the country. It was actually ranked nationally in the last 5 of the 10, but it was high. The point being that they had a very comprehensive education. And so when I came in, I had to teach my own music and art and phys ed. I had a background in all those that I could draw upon. I might not have been an expert, but I was not totally fresh to it. I think that the teaching itself, the subject matter, the content, was never a problem to me. I never really felt that I was going to teach something I knew nothing about. I think what I was not really prepared for and was the clerical work. I knew that there was a lot of clerical work involved in it, but I think an inordinate amount of it took place. Yeah. A lot of it could have been dispensed. A lot of it could have been handled by others who were not classroom teachers. But it was considered part of the job, and, who knew better at the time?
And on that subject of clerical, I'm wondering if attendance and lateness was a problem of students or teachers throughout your tenure. Is that something that is not now and was never a problem? Or
no, it's always been a problem. Oh, yeah, faculty and students. We've had teachers who've lived very far away from here, and It took them a while to get here, and if it was an accident on a parkway, they were late.
Were there always buses bringing students to school when you were teaching, Jack?
On the elementary level, yeah.
Uh-huh.
It was one of those fights that I was in, and I think right now, I don't know if it's changed, but I think we won that fight, and that is, I never could understand how you could have kids coming home in the dark in elementary school, especially the early primary grades, and not bring them to the door of their house. That was something I fought for, and I think we got finally. I hate to see youngsters walking home in places where there are no sidewalks, cars speeding down, and kids being kids, totally oblivious.
Yes.
But we got them. Yeah. We got them there.
What was the most serious problem that you've probably faced as a teacher?
As a teacher, probably following rules and orders. Mm-hmm. If they made sense, if they took time to explain to me what was going on, I could handle it. Yeah. If I thought it was absurd, I had a tendency to let them know that. Many times, I would take a notice that came out of an office and write comments and send it right back to the office. They knew that I was aware of their what I considered absurdities.
How many years did you teach in all?
Well, I taught in all of them, actually.
That's a good answer.
Then it weren't always classroom teaching, but they were teaching.
Yes. Do you remember how much money you earned your first year as a teacher?
Well, I was hired here in '56 with a master's degree. I just graduated from Hofstra on the GI Bill, and $4,000 was what the master's degree commanded.
If you had it to do all over again, would you still have chosen to pursue education as a career?
Absolutely. I tell you, I was sorry to leave it. I enjoyed teaching.
Why did you leave, Jack?
I left for medical reasons, basically.
Mm-hmm.
I had the time and it was not a difficult decision to make from a hospital bed.
Yes.
But I felt that each year I became a better teacher, and I think I did my best teaching toward the end when I finally had to leave. But I enjoyed my teaching the most at that time. Mm-hmm. I became, I don't know, this probably will sound funny and strange, but I think philosophically, I really mean it. I became mature enough to be able to grasp what had to be done and how to do it. Yeah. It took a long time to put together. Maybe I'm slower than others, but when I did, I enjoyed it very much from beginning to end.
What message would you have for someone who is just beginning a career teaching?
Well, my message would be hang in there, because it's one of the occupations that this world absolutely needs. I mean, it goes back to Socrates, and he had a hard time. And today you could have a hard time. You may have to drink the hemlock, but there might be other things that substitute for that. But the point is, it is a profession that is worthwhile. It's a profession where you're doing something to mold the future of not only the kid in front of you, but the community, the country, and you're doing something for yourself too.
This is a tough question, and I know it's a tough question, but in a few sentences, can you summarize what your personal philosophy of education is?
I think education is making available to youngsters the techniques and ability to learn.
Okay.
I found out with my own youngsters at home and the ones in front of me too, if they saw the pathways, they could be motivated to take them and they would learn themselves. You can't make them learn by standing in front and saying, thou shalt learn. But if you make it possible for them to learn and it's worthwhile they're learning, you're not going to stop them. And so the point is you have to create the situation where they want to learn.
Jack, how would you like to be remembered?
Oh, I suppose fondly. I'd like to be remembered, I guess, as a person who went out of his way to teach the best he could. I would like to be remembered as a person who brought professionalism to the teaching staff here through the working with the teacher union. I was fortunate to be here at the time when teacher unionism became a big thing in the state of New York.
How active were you in that?
I was extremely active. I was everything from a building rep to a grievance chairman to a president of the local. And at that time, Brentwood was the 6th largest local after 5 states in the state of New York. I was on the state board of directors.
23,000 students at that time, as I recall.
We went that high, yeah. So that it was something that was very, very important to me, because through unionism, we could improve the conditions under which kids could learn.
Yes.
And that was always my thrust. You know, the teacher that can function well because the environment was good was the teacher who could deliver the goods. And that was the way to do it.
Now, is there anything that we didn't ask that you wish we had, or a question that you would like to answer that hasn't been asked? That's really what my point. What didn't we cover?
I think that maybe you did a very good job of covering it. I'm not sure. I think that if there were any areas we had to explore further, just simply for the record, I would like to explore the areas of the growth of the unionism in Brentwood and how it affected our staff here. But that's, I think, a topic for another day, and I don't.
And the personalities. I didn't ask you at all about personalities that you remember, and I don't know whether you might want to save that for another time, or if you'd like to comment on a couple of.
Well, we certainly had our share of characters, and we had our share of scholars, people who left here, went to jail as teachers. And we've had people who went on to college teaching. Mm-hmm. We've had some as heads of corporations. Yes. We've had very, very varied and very good staff, really. And considering how they started out getting the staff, I mean, it was spectacular, because they used to send out recruiters. Anything that anyone who breathed and showed some kind of animation was basically invited to teach here. Mm-hmm. It was the school districts on the island competed for teachers, so they would send out recruiters to Vermont and North Carolina and all over to come back to teach here in Brentwood. And all in all, I think we were very fortunate to get the staff that we did. Mm-hmm. That plus the fact that during the 1960s, we had many people become teachers, because to help them avoid being in the Vietnam business. And I think that many of those people turned out to be very good teachers. So we've been very fortunate.
Jack, I want to thank you for being with us and wish you every best wish in the road ahead.
Thank you, John. I enjoyed it very much.
Okay, Tom. Okay. I almost walked away with this wire.
So,